Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. Last night was very difficult for me and Sap. There was no basketball on. I don't know how we got through it, Sap. It was trying. I know you said you watched the College World Series, which seems insane to me, but, to each their own.
Yeah, I watched a little bit of the College World Series, Jet. Al Leiter's son, I believe it's Jack Leiter, who pitches for Vanderbilt, is an outstanding pitcher, top pitching prospect. And I'm kind of hoping the Red Sox, who have the fourth pick in the draft, and we very rarely ever talk about the Major League Baseball draft because it's done in secrecy. It's like, it's like being at the Vatican when they select the next pope. It's not even really done on TV like the NBA or the NFL draft, where it's a big event. But the Red Sox have the fourth pick in the first round, and I'd like to see them get Jack Leiter, who
1,000 rounds. So, that's
there are 1,000 rounds. I mean, I may get drafted at 58 years old as a backup catcher, but I'd like to see the Red Sox get Jack Leiter, and he'd be up here in a couple of years probably after spending some time in the minor league. So he was outstanding last night. He's dynamite, and he's got the bloodlines. Al Leiter pitched for the Yankees, among many other teams. So I just wanted to check him out, and he's as advertised.
Yeah, just admit that you were, desperate, and that was what you landed on.
I was. It was either that or the Tampa Bay Lightning beating the Islanders 8-0 in the Stanley Cup semifinals.
To some people that might be entertaining, probably not to, New York Islanders fans, but a rare, especially in the playoffs, you don't see that many goals from one team. It's very unusual, I feel like.
No, they're good. They're really good. The defending champs, I think they'll win again. I mean, they have the best roster top to bottom, so it wouldn't surprise me if the Lightning repeat as champions. Once again, Tampa Bay, the center of the sports universe, right? They go back-to-back in hockey. The Rays are right in contention in the American League East. They're the reigning American League champs. And, oh, by the way, Tampa Bay, led by Tampa Bay, not Tampa Bay. Tom Brady leading the Buccaneers to the Super Bowl last year. They're the favorites to repeat. That's the center of the universe right now in the sports world is Tampa.
I think it's infectious. I said this to my friends and to my dad. I think when he left, it doomed Boston sports more than what Kyrie did to the Celtics. I think that Tom Brady leaving Boston hurt all of the teams here. He's like the golden goose.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when he was at the University of Michigan, the Detroit Red Wings started winning Stanley Cups. Shortly after he left Michigan, the Pistons won a championship. He was already here, so we can't give him credit for that one. Growing up, he was a 49ers fan. They won 4 Super Bowls in a 9-year period. So wherever Brady goes, they win, whether it's San Francisco, Michigan, New England, and now in Tampa. He's the good luck charm.
I hope when he dies in 10,000 years, because that's how old he's going to be, that he donates his body to science so they can sort of extract the luck gene or the not that he's lucky, but that he spreads it around to other teams. I don't want to sound like that dope on Fox Sports 1, Rob Parker, saying he's the LOAT. He's not. He's the greatest player of all time in football. But there's something going on where it's just infectious. He affects winning.
Yeah, you've heard the expression "the cooler." Like in Vegas, they have people walking around the casinos, right, and they send them next to people that are hot to try to cool them down. Eddie Mush in A Bronx Tale. Remember, as soon as people found out he bet the same horse as them, they just started ripping up their tickets. They knew they were going to lose because Eddie Mush had the same horse. Well, Brady's the opposite of that. He's the opposite of whatever the cooler is. Like if Brady's in your city, you're going to start winning. If he leaves, you're going to start losing. I mean, Kyrie left the Celtics, right? And they went back to the Eastern Conference Finals the very next year. The Red Sox lost a lot with Mookie Betts. We know that. Then Mookie went to L.A. and won the World Series with the Dodgers. But that Dodgers team was ready to win a World Series anyway. He kind of was the person that put them over the top. With Tampa Bay, they were 7-9 the year before Brady showed up. They win the Super Bowl, beat my guy in the NFC Championship game. Still can't get over that. But no, Brady's the lucky charm. So the Lightning will probably win their second straight Stanley Cup title, and the Buccaneers are favorite to win yet another Super Bowl with Tom Brady. He is magical.
Yeah, no, he really is. But we don't have to watch the College World Series tonight, Sap, because there is basketball on again. The Clippers and Suns resume their series. The Suns are up 1-0. No Kawhi Leonard, no Chris Paul in this game. Officially both ruled out. Both injuries, COVID, whatever you want to call them, shrouded in secrecy still. We don't really seem to have any clarity on either one of these. All we know is that the game will be in Phoenix. The Suns are favored by 4.5 points. And that's about all we know.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Paul is there because of COVID. Was he vaccinated? Did he catch COVID? Is there some other issue involved? I would expect him to be back for game 3, which will take place, I believe, Thursday night in LA. So if the Suns can win tonight, they'll take a commanding 2-0 lead, which really hasn't impacted how the Clippers have played in their first 2 series. They came back from 2-0 down against Dallas to win that series. They were down 2-0 against Utah, came back and won that series. I think if Phoenix gets up 2-0, Phoenix has got the wherewithal to finish it off better than either Dallas or Utah, especially with Chris Paul coming back in game 3. So that's the component for the Phoenix Suns. Kawhi, we know that he hurt his knee late in the Utah series. It didn't look all that serious till the reports came out that it was more serious than that. He missed game 1. He's not going to play in game 2. You're hearing conflicting reports that he's done for the year, but then you also hear there's a possibility he comes back. Tonight's a huge game. If the Clippers can steal tonight's game, now it's a best of 5 with the Clippers having home court advantage. And now we'll have to see what Chris Paul is like when he comes back, because if he did have COVID, there could be some after effects of that. We heard Jason Tatum talk about that. It took him a while to feel himself. And we're talking about Chris Paul, who's 36 years old. How is he going to recover if, in fact, he had COVID? So there's a lot to be, on the table tonight in Phoenix. And the Suns have won 8 in a row. I mean, they won their last 3 against the Lakers to move on. They swept Denver handily, and they won on Sunday. So they've won 8 in a row. They right now look like the best team in basketball. But that doesn't necessarily mean much, because we've seen how these series can flip quickly, especially when the Clippers are involved. And I think part of the reason is that Ty Lue is really ascended to being one of the best coaches in the NBA, especially within a series, how quickly he adjusts. He did that in the first 2 series, and I'm sure he'll attempt to do that tonight.
Yeah, he's pressing the right buttons, certainly. It's been a weird playoffs for Chris Paul, right? With the shoulder injury in the first game, he suffered that shoulder injury against the Lakers. And now with COVID and all the uncertainty of, when he's going to return, because we said this when he was diagnosed, or not diagnosed, when they said COVID protocols, that's meant different things throughout the year to different players. Some players, right, it's meant that they were in close proximity to somebody with COVID and they're back in like a couple of days. Some players, it's meant that they actually have COVID and they're out, a month or so, more than that. So there's still some uncertainty as to Chris Paul's situation. But yeah, between the shoulder injury and this, it has been strange, but the Suns have been able to be extremely resilient. And as you mentioned, have won 8 games in a row. Sap, do you think the first game in this series, which the Suns won in a pretty close game, 120-114, is maybe something you can look at for this game? Is that sort of how you see it potentially going? Are there things you could take from that game if you're the Clippers and try to adjust? How do you see this one playing out?
Well, I also think a big factor is Marcus Morris going to play, and how effective will he be? Because throughout the first 2 rounds, at times Marcus Morris was the 3rd best player on the Clippers after Kawhi and Paul George. And he's hit big shots, especially in big games, especially in that Dallas series. He was huge. Game 7, he's the one who turned a deficit into a lead in the 3rd quarter. So Marcus Morris has been a really nice player for the Clippers this year. Is he going to be available tonight? He has some issue with his knee, so that is also a big concern. Phoenix just seems to be clicking on all cylinders, though. Even without Chris Paul, we see Devin Booker have, I believe, the best game of his career, a 40-point triple-double in game 1 of this series, his first triple-double, and he has it in game 1 of the Western Conference Finals, and that's why you now have Stephen A. Smith saying that he's the next Kobe Bryant, which let's pump the brakes on that a little bit, although I did say that I think that Devin Booker has a game that is reminiscent to Kobe Bryant's a few weeks ago. He reminds me the most of Kobe Bryant of any player playing right now. Similar size, great footwork, ability to score from multiple levels. But let's not put him in Kobe Bryant's level quite yet.
Right.
Kobe did win 5 championships, an MVP, and made all defensive first team numerous times. Devin Booker's going to have to work his way up to that, but I think he has the skill set to do that.
I still think people, for the most part, believe Chris Paul is the best player on that team.
Yeah, I think he's the most important, right, because of the leadership. I think you can make a case that in a vacuum that Devin Booker is the best player, but
Yeah.
Chris Paul is the most valuable, right?
Well, Devin Booker is a lot closer to his prime than Chris Paul.
Right. And you could almost make a case, I don't know if you can with the Lakers, that Anthony Davis is the most important Laker right now, but LeBron's still the best player. Or you can actually reverse that and say LeBron's the most important player, whereas Anthony Davis at some point may surpass LeBron as the best player on that team. That's a little bit more complicated. So if Booker's not the best player on his team, are you going to start comparing him to Kobe Bryant, who, by the way, won 3 titles as the second best player on his team? I mean, that was more about Shaq than Kobe, although it was probably, 55-45, Shaq to Kobe, and then they had all those role players involved as well. So Booker's been damn impressive, but so the rest of the other Phoenix Suns.
Yeah, they have. The Suns have really played as a team, which is, a credit to the roster construction and to Monty Williams, who you think is maybe the best coach in the NBA right now.
One of the best, yeah.
They had all their starters in double figures in game 1. They're getting really just good production out of everybody. Everybody's sort of playing within their role. And as far as the Clippers go, it seems like, I don't know if this is more of a Ty Lue thing or a credit to the guys on the roster. They do seem to have just some guy outside of their 2 stars, step up in a given game. We saw in game 6, it was Terrence Mann who had the game of his career. Local guy, by the way, from Lowell, which I did not know before that game. So big props to Terrence Mann from Lowell. Or last game, you had Reggie Jackson was fantastic. You've had Nick Batum play solid minutes. Morris, as you mentioned, Rondo, Beverly, even DeMarcus Cousins had a solid game last game. The corpse of DeMarcus Cousins. So the Clippers are interesting in that they're not consistent with who steps up, but they're consistent that somebody steps up.
It's kind of like the Lakers last year, right? You had LeBron, Anthony Davis, and some other guy, whether it was KCP or Rondo or Kuzma occasionally or whoever. Dwight Howard would have a monster game. He did have a couple of big games against Denver in the conference finals. That's the way that roster is constructed. There really isn't a true number 3 on the Clippers. Kawhi's their best player. Paul George is their second best player. And then they have about 6 guys who at any moment can be the third best player. And that's why I give a lot of credit to Ty Lue, because he's picking the right combination in every game to get the most out of those players. We didn't see Rondo much in the prior series, right? Played very little in that 6-game series over Utah, but now he's playing more in this series. And I can't wait till Chris Paul gets on the court and we see Rondo matched up against Chris Paul, because those 2 guys despise each other. They just don't like each other. That'll be a great matchup. And Rondo sometimes can get in Chris Paul's head. That's going to be fascinating. And it would be apropos that Chris Paul to finally break through and get to a finals, that the last obstacle may be Rajon Rondo, who's always been kind of a pest for Chris Paul. They've never really faced each other in the postseason because they're playing in different conferences. Yeah, I mean, then they both ended up as members of New Orleans at one point, right? It was Chris Paul, and then it was Rondo went there later. So I think it would be fascinating. And yeah, as you said, Jet, get by the Clippers to get to an NBA Finals, although none of the Clippers that were there when he was there are still there. It's Kawhi and Paul George, et cetera. So there's so many different side stories involved in that series. I just think Phoenix is better. I think Devin Booker right now is playing at an incredibly high level. He seems to be in a zone, and Monty Williams, like Ty Lue, pushing all the right buttons. And it's a pretty interesting story. A team that hadn't made the playoffs for 10 straight years has a great year this year by adding a veteran point guard who a lot of people thought was washed up, and he has an MVP caliber season, and those young players just follow him, and now they're a true contender, especially the way things shook out. They probably would have lost to the Lakers in the first round if Anthony Davis doesn't get hurt in that series. Even though LeBron was
hobbled. You know how I felt about that, yeah.
I mean, let's not forget, when Anthony Davis went down with the groin injury, which was like his 4th different injury of the year, the Lakers were up 2-1, and they were up 11 points early in the second quarter, game 4. I looked at that and said, this series is going to be over in 5, maybe 6. The Lakers are on their way going back to the finals. Anthony Davis got hurt, and give Phoenix credit. They took advantage of that. And then Denver wasn't quite right against Phoenix. So Phoenix is catching some breaks, but as we said yesterday, Jet, you kind of need that to win a championship, unless you're the 0-1 Lakers who go 16-1 in the postseason and obliterate everybody. You kind of need a little help along the way. I mean, Kawhi Leonard won a title 2 years ago. It helped a lot that Golden State was banged up and Kevin Durant only played 10 minutes in the finals, and Steph was banged up and Clay got hurt, and that helped Toronto win that finals. I mean, you need a little bit of help along the way. Everything's breaking right for Phoenix. Anthony Davis got hurt in the first round, no Jamal Murray in the second round, and now no Kawhi Leonard in the conference finals. So Phoenix has been getting a lot of breaks, but they are taking advantage of it. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, I mean, as great as Chris Paul is, and we both think he's, phenomenal and the sort of the straw that stirs the drink at Phoenix, you take that trade all day, every day, Kawhi out for Chris Paul out. If you're Phoenix, I mean, I think you do.
As pure players, yeah. Yeah, I mean, Kawhi is, we've said this a million times, in the hierarchy of the NBA, debate LeBron, Kevin Durant, do whatever you want. I mean, you know where I stand on that, but those are the two best players. And right below them would be Kawhi Leonard and Steph Curry. I think those are the four best players in the NBA because they all have championships, the championship DNA, all-time great type players. So, obviously Kawhi is a big loss for the Clippers, but we know how important Chris Paul is. And we'll find out. Again, this is a big game for Phoenix, I think, because they want to consolidate things and then get Chris Paul back healthy, and I think they'll be on their way to winning the series.
Yeah, it's a big game for them, certainly. And, the Clippers obviously are comfortable going down. That doesn't seem to be much of an issue for them. It's just, without Kawhi, and I know that they won the last series without him in the last game. Paul George, stepped up majorly in the last two games there. They're still, fighting with a hand tied behind their back, really. I mean, he's their best player. He's their closer. He's really their closer. He's their best defensive player, as great as Paul George is defensively too. Kawhi's still better. So it's a tall task for the Clippers. And you certainly, if you're the Suns, you don't want to put any sort of spark of hope in their minds. So yeah, it's important for the Suns, and they're the favorite in this series. And so if you're the favorite, you are expected to hold home court, which is what they're intending to do tonight. So Sep, 4.5 is the spread. How do you see that?
I like the Clippers plus 4.5. I think it's going to be a bucket game. I think it's going to be like a 108, 105 type win for Phoenix. So I'm trying to thread a needle there by saying Phoenix is going to win but not cover. I go with the zigzag. Phoenix covered game 1, so I got to go with the Clippers to cover in game 2, but I think Phoenix will still find a way to win the game but not cover.
For some reason, and this is probably very unfair of me to do, I'm kind of still expecting Paul George to have one awful game, and he is. And so I'm maybe tonight, and so I'll take Phoenix with the 4.5. I just don't know. Listen, he's talented enough to keep this up, but history indicates to me that he's going to have a stinker along the way here.
Oh, yeah. Every player does, with the exception of who? LeBron, Durant, even Kawhi's had stinkers in the postseason. Even Steph Curry has had stinkers in the postseason. Unfortunately for Paul George, if he has a stinker, who's going to pick him up? Like, who's going to step in? Is Terrence Mann going to have 39 again? Probably not. Is Reggie Jackson going to continue to have, 25, 26 points per game average, especially if now there's a lot of pressure on him? No. So, yeah, I could see that happening where the crowd just gets into Paul George's head, and that is a loud place to play. They're smelling a championship.
Seth. I mean, he's so much – the usage rate is crazy for him in the past couple of games because the only, actual scorer they have, the rest of them are kind of streaky scorers who don't really create their own shots. So, again, maybe it's completely unfair and he's overcome all this stuff, but I'm going to go with history and say that he is due for a really bad game, and so I'll say that's tonight.
And you're probably saying if push comes to shove, you trust Devin Booker at this point to continue to maintain his level of play rather than Paul George because of the age difference and also the fact that I think Phoenix is just slightly better.
Age difference, he's at home. I like Phoenix's roster a
little bit better. Yeah.
I
mean, as much as people used to make fun of Jay Crowder, it does appear that Jay Crowder keeps showing up in places and they win. Last year he played in the finals with Miami. Looks like he's headed to another finals with Phoenix. He's like the perfect guy on your team, a guy who can be very comfortable taking 6 or 8 shots a game or, gets hot from 3. He was huge in that Lakers series. He'll battle defensively. He's just always in the mix there. Mikal Bridges is developing into a really nice player, right? We know that DeAndre Ayton is becoming an elite center, and then their bench is good. They've got some quality guys. Campaign is a nice backup point guard for Chris Paul. He's playing more minutes, obviously, with Paul out, and he's a guy who had, again, a huge series against the Lakers, hitting threes. They're playing defense. It just seems like it's their year. Everything's there for them to get to the finals, kind of the way it seems like it's Milwaukee's year to get to the finals, because they met Brooklyn in the second round, and Harden gets hurt 48 seconds into game one, and even though he came back for games 5, 6, and 7, he wasn't himself, and then Kyrie gets hurt in game 4, so that the Nets really never had the big three together in that series, and it still went to game 7 overtime. Milwaukee outlasted Brooklyn. It seems like things are stepping up for both Milwaukee and Phoenix.
Yeah, it's opened up
in the right place. It has.
For those
now,
two teams.
Now Milwaukee faces Atlanta.
Exactly.
God bless them, rather than Joel Embiid and a talented Philadelphia team. So sometimes the path opens for you, and it looks like the path's opening for Phoenix and Milwaukee.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, Sap. I think that the two teams have sort of had things exactly like you said, open up for them more than any other team. I mean, certainly you could make an argument that, Atlanta is playing as well as anybody. I mean, they are, but you'd still rather play them than the Sixers just based on the talent and experience of the teams, I would think. I mean, maybe Milwaukee looked at Philadelphia and said, I don't know, this team will implode on themselves at some point. We'd like to play them.
I think this Eastern Conference Finals is a bad matchup for Atlanta. The size difference. I think that Drew Holiday is going to be a really good matchup for Trae Young. Trae Young is going to still put up his numbers, but he's going to have to work his ass off to do that, and maybe be too much of a volume scorer with Drew Holiday on him. And I think Giannis is going to be able to control things against Atlanta. I think it's a bad matchup for Atlanta. But look, the Hawks are 35-15 since Nate McMillan took over. So this is not a mirage. This isn't just a Cinderella run. They appear to be in really good shape, and their future is very good because they're so damn young. And again, as we talked about yesterday, Jed, I would think that if they need to, they can get a viable free agent to go to Atlanta. It's a destination for young athletes. I would think that they could maybe sign not a top tier free agent, but a really good piece that could maybe put them over the top in future years. I just don't think it's now.
Yeah, it's a fun city to play in. It's I think it's the black entertainment capital of the world. So that's a big draw to a lot of people. A lot of players are actually from the Atlanta area.
Yep.
And Trae Young is a legitimate star who I think can recruit. And by the way, he's a fantastic distributor, which I think is enticing to some players. We got a guy who's a great passer. He's going to get 10 plus assists a game. Sign me up. I think that is a potential really good free agent destination. Atlanta's only advantage that I see them having in this series is just trying to play into their youth and athleticism. Milwaukee's still an athletic team, but Atlanta might be the most athletic team in basketball between Capella and Collins. I mean, you got two guys who can jump out of the gym. I don't know how much athleticism can dictate winning a series. It could potentially win a game. But yeah, I agree with you. I don't think it's a good matchup for the Hawks.
No, I don't think it is. But they're on a roll as well, and Trae Young is as good as any player in this postseason. But
by the way, Sep, I didn't think Philadelphia was a good matchup for them either, because I thought Ben Simmons would be able to effectively guard Trae Young, and I thought that Embiid would be able to have his way.
Of the series, which he did later in the series when they finally put Ben Simmons on him. I thought Ben Simmons did a decent job on Trae Young, but we know what happened on the other end of the court when Ben Simmons would refuse to shoot. Didn't take one field goal attempt in the final quarter of the final 4 games. That's a 48-minute stretch where he did not attempt a field goal. Look, you could have got a drunken fan out of the stands. They would have chucked up one from somewhere. Ben Simmons didn't even do that.
Yeah, and we talked about this a lot yesterday. I mean, he's rightly so taking, a huge beating in the media, and it looks like he's on his way out of Philadelphia, and his trade value is at an all-time low, and you're seeing him offered for basically, pennies on the dollar in all these sort of mock trades. And I think you're in the same camp as me, Sep, that we both fully believe he's going to be moved this offseason.
I would think so, yeah, unless the value is so low that they may just have to hold on to him and try to rehabilitate him. Is he willing to work on his game? That's the big question. I mean, I get turned off when people go, well, Ben's not a shooter, so don't bother. Well, we're not asking him to turn into Klay Thompson or Steph Curry, but can you hit a 12, 15-footer? And more importantly, can you hit 70% of your free throws? Because that would open up his game, right? If he could hit 70% of his free throws, now he can drive to the basket effectively, which he's very good at, And then at the end of the game, he's not a liability that you have to take him off the floor because he shot 34% in the postseason from the free throw line.
If he hit 70% of his free throws, I think he'd be in the top 15 players in the league. Because
that's what he was for a while.
But he's so far away from 70% of his free throws right now.
It's not even close. I mean, how many times have I said this? He could be the next Scottie Pippen. I know we're saying Devin Booker could be the next Kobe Bryant. I push back a little bit, but I do see some similarities in their games. Ben Simmons is really Scottie Pippen, right? A bigger version of him. Great passer, excellent rebounder, can defend multiple positions. But Scottie Pippen developed into a really good offensive player who'd get you 18, 19 points a game. And then the year he was without Jordan, he averaged close to 23 a game and finished third in the league in MVP voting. So he was able to learn his game. Now, here's the thing. Scottie Pippen had Michael Jordan pushing him to the point where Scottie Pippen became an elite player. Who the hell is pushing Ben Simmons in Philadelphia? I don't think it's Joel Embiid, because as great as Embiid is, can he be a leader like that? Because he's misses a lot of games, many because of his lack of conditioning.
Don't think he likes Ben Simmons.
I don't even think they like each other, where we know Pippen respected the hell out of Jordan and they still have a good relationship. Is it Doc Rivers, who again just seems to yell a lot? I mean, Doc Rivers is starting to remind me a little bit of Ralph Cramden from The Honeymooners. He's just constantly like making faces, grabbing his head. It just doesn't look like he's in control. Look at Nate McMillan or Ty Lue or Monty Williams on the sidelines. Forget Budenholzer because he looks lost himself. But those other three coaches that are still, involved, they seem so calm and fatherly on the sideline, and I think the players respond much better than that to Doc Rivers, who's kind of a little bit unhinged at times.
Yeah, I mean, I said this yesterday, Sap. I agree with you, but I also feel like Ben Simmons is probably the most maddening player in the league to coach.
Sure.
Because you see all the talent, and you're just like, be talented. Like, you have all this ability, just be good. So I think it's frustrating. And now the Sixers are coming out saying, we have a plan to rehabilitate Ben Simmons. They won't say what it is. They said it's not about switching his shooting hand at the free throw line. So I don't really know what their plan is. The plan is to trade him, I guess.
He's been there for 5 years. We've heard this for 5 off seasons. We're going to fix his shooting, and it's the same. It's gotten worse, actually.
I was watching clips, Sap, of him, his first summer league. And he was taking and draining mid-range shots left and right. You're like, damn, man, this guy's going to be scary.
Forget the three.
He doesn't even take them anymore.
Forget the threes. I mean, that's fine. You can exist without threes. I mean, Devin Booker's not a great three-point shooter, right? But my God, he's elite mid-range and he creates his own shot. We're not even asking Ben Simmons to do that. I just want him to be able to hit a 12 or a 15-footer, which is mid-range, but more importantly, hit 70% of your free throws, because now he's electric going to the basket, right? I mean, I think other than LeBron and Giannis, he's probably the third toughest guy to deal with going to the basket because of his just sheer size and athleticism.
Yeah, LeBron, Giannis, Zion, Ben Simmons.
Zion. Yeah, put Zion in there, obviously. And I'll put Harden as the fifth guy because he's kind of masterful with the basket. He's left-handed. He kind of has
he just gets fouled.
Balance, and he gets a ton of calls. But yeah, I forgot to put Zion in there. But those are the guys that when they're going to the basket, it's like, holy crap, these guys are huge. They're athletic. In the case of LeBron, he's ambidextrous. So that's why I think he's actually the greatest in the history of the sport at going to the basket. You'd have to go back to probably Elgin Baylor in the 60s to find a comp. But you have to hit free throws because now they're going to just keep following you. And if you shoot 34% from the free throw line, they're just going to keep putting you there. And it eliminates so many of your options offensively that really makes it difficult for you. It's like a quarterback that can't throw a screen pass. You can't even have a great. You could set up the perfect screen, but the guy throws it into the back's knees or over his head, and that's out of the offense.
No, it killed Philadelphia, and we talked about this at length yesterday too. And the last point I'm going to make is, like I said, it's not even hit a 12-footer right now. It's baby steps. It's take a 12-footer right now.
Right.
Take, then make. Then you're talking about something, but it's so far gone right now, Sap. I mean, he, like you said, didn't attempt a shot in the fourth quarter. That's impossible.
In 4 straight games. Like, by accident, you'd take a shot, right? I mean, he had a dunk, and he turned it down to give it to Matisse Thybulle for a layup, who then got fouled and hit 1 of 2, and then you get Joel Embiid saying that was the turning point in the game, which I think may have been a bit hyperbolic. I mean, Joel Embiid's 8 turnovers had a lot to do with it, but yeah, they don't like each other. That's obvious. okay, Kareem and Magic, I don't think they hung around a lot together, but they were also 11 years apart in age. Kareem was very shy, introspective, deep thinker. Magic was the life of the party, very outgoing. So that wasn't a good fit, but man, on the court, it was perfect. McHale and Bird weren't best buds, but on the court, they worked well together. LeBron and Dwayne Wade, there were two guys that I think are really great friends, but it took them time to work well on the court. Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, I don't think like each other, and they don't even fit together. There's like no redeeming qualities having those two guys on the same team.
Well, I think look at it from, Joel Embiid's perspective a little bit too, coming from Cameroon and Africa right. and playing soccer and working his way basically to be good enough to play in the United States. And then he has the injury in college at Kansas and he goes to number 3 when it seems like he pretty clearly should have been number 1, probably would have been had he not gotten hurt, and, continued to work and work and work and work. And Ben Simmons, grew up in Australia, which is, no, I'm not, Donald Trump and calling Cameroon, an asshole country or anything like that, but it's not Australia. And he's, the number 1 pick, and he sort of has this nice, nice and easy going, and he hasn't improved his game at all since coming in the league. Embiid had to wait like 3 freaking years after being drafted to start playing. I'm sure he looks at it and goes, what the hell?
And if I'm Simmons, I look at him and say, what the hell can you get in better shape? I mean, so there's going to be friction there, right? And then you've got to have the right coach. And again, I think Doc's just, seen better days as a head coach. And I love Doc, but I think the league's kind of passed him by a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So, Philadelphia's eliminated. It's their issue to worry about. And we have the Bucks and the Hawks in the next round, and they're playing on Wednesday, Sap. So we'll talk about that game more tomorrow. Tonight, actually, Sap, is the NBA draft lottery, which I know you're very excited about.
And we'll watch that. Yes, at 8:30.
I always get excited about the draft lottery, though the Celtics are not involved this year. They have been involved like the past 15 years because they've had a million picks, but none of which have been their own for a while, and then squandered them. But tonight, Sap, we have a very interesting lottery, not because of the players that are available. We'll talk about those in a second, but because of some outstanding trades that could really affect the lottery tonight. I'm going to be reading this from NBC Sports. They have broke down the exactly what's going on with the lottery tonight. The Rockets keep their first rounder only if it lands in the top 4, which they have a 52% chance of landing in the top 4. Otherwise, they swap the number 5 pick, which is the worst they can do. I believe, because they had the worst record in basketball, Houston. They were horrible this year. And that would go to the Thunder for the number 18 pick, is what the Thunder, I think, are slotted at, or for whatever reason. That's what the NBC
has. Yeah, they have 18th and 16th from the Celtics because they've got 18 first-round picks the next 7 years. Oklahoma City does.
So Houston needs it to be a top 4 pick. Otherwise, they lose it. Minnesota keeps their first rounder only if it lands in the top 3, only a 28% chance of that happening. Otherwise, they just give it outright to the Golden State Warriors. That is, I believe, because of the D'Angelo Russell trade, which
isn't the Wiggins deal also have something
wasn't that
to do
part
with
of that was a
there were separate
Wiggins
deals.
It was,
I think
was it a
was
separate
Wiggins
deal?
Too. I think it was
that was
deal.
Wiggins and for Russell and a pick. I thought that's what
it may have been. Yeah, because originally that's right.
Sorry, Wiggins and a pick for Russell.
Right, that's what it was, because they signed Russell as a free agent and then flipped him for Wiggins and a pick. And yeah, Golden State's doing a nice job. If they can get lucky and get maybe the 5th pick in the first round, which is a possibility for Golden State.
It could be, or 5th or 4th.
Right. So if they get that, they may not select a player. They may flip that for someone, right?
Yeah, that was a horrible trade for Minnesota, by the way. I mean, D'Angelo Russell's fine, but it's not like he's Andrew Wiggins plus the 5th pick in the draft better.
Oh, no, that was a disaster. That's a great move for Golden State. Like I said, if they get the 4th or 5th pick in the first round, they can flip that maybe for Ben Simmons. I mean, I know you got to make contracts work, all that stuff. But I mean, like Ben Simmons to Golden State with Curry and Klay Thompson, that would be interesting. But you'd have the capital, at least in terms of value, to go back to Philadelphia. But now you got to start having all these contracts match.
He'd be the anti-Splash brother.
Yeah, he'd be more like the Ripple brother.
Right. Yeah. No, he's the Brick brother.
The Brick brother. Be
so,
good shooters to play with, though.
So high chance that Minnesota seems to lose that pick. They only have a 28% chance of keeping it. The Bulls keep their first rounder only if it lands in the top 4, Zap, just a 20% chance of that. Otherwise, they convey it to the Magic. That was part of the Nikola Vucevic trade from this trading deadline. If they keep the pick this year, Chicago will owe Orlando a top 3 protected first rounder next year. So those are some big situations for those teams have some of the worst records in the league, could very well lose their picks, which is really interesting. It typically, you don't see that happen all that often, Sap, where a team could just outright lose their pick, especially multiple teams. This is the result of some probably bad trading, though. Chicago, I think, knew what they were getting into when they traded for Vucevic and said, we're okay losing a pick. We want Vucevic anyways to pair with LaVine.
Yeah, Vucevic is an all-star caliber player, and they thought they could make a run to the postseason. Then Zach LaVine, was out for a while, so they weren't able to put it all together. They've got some nice pieces in Chicago. Orlando also has some nice pieces that they're building with draft picks and young players if they can get them healthy. Markelle Fultz is a player that we all root for. He's playing pretty well with Orlando, but then suffered yet another injury. Right. So we'll see if he comes back next year.
The funniest one, Sap, though, I mean, not for their fan base, is Houston, who's had, just this horrible year. And if they lose their pick, which, they have a basically a 50-50 chance of losing their pick tonight, then, they're going to be the exact same next year. They will have no mechanism to get a good young player on their team. That is part of the Russell Westbrook trade.
Right. Yeah. I mean, these teams, it's just, first of all, good luck to the people in the league that keep track of all this. I think you're the only person that knows about these things. You and probably, Shams and also
it's hard.
It's about
especially when the Celtics aren't involved. I lose track of it.
Yes, there's so many combinations. There's like algebra, which used to frighten me. But this is all too leading up to a draft where we agree that Cade Cunningham is the best player coming out.
Yeah, Cade Cunningham, I think, seems to be the consensus one step. I know you're really big on Jalen Suggs. When we were watching the tournament and talking about that on the show, you were constantly hyping up Jalen Suggs, who had a pretty good tournament, including a game winner, but everybody on Gonzaga really failed to show up in the national championship game.
That kind of turned me off a little bit because Baylor's guards were so athletic. It's like that's what he's going to face in the NBA. So his athleticism isn't as pronounced in the NBA as it was in college. When you're playing at Gonzaga, maybe you play a decent schedule, but you could dominate athletically, win every game by more than 10 points, and then all of a sudden you get to the Final Four. UCLA forced them into a close game, and then they got blown out by Baylor. So that could be a turnoff. But I like his makeup. I think he has a Jason Kidd type game. I'm not saying he's going to be Jason Kidd, but he's got that leadership ability, defense, football background. So I like that part of him. But there's no, phenomenal player coming up. Maybe Cade Cunningham is that guy, but what's his ceiling? I mean, we're not talking about obviously LeBron or Tim Duncan or Kevin Durant or anybody like that. I don't even think these guys measure up to even Zion from a couple of years ago. So, when you get involved in the draft lottery and win it, it's also important the players that come out. I mean, a couple of years ago, you had Luke as the 3rd pick and Trae Young as the 5th pick. That turned out pretty well. And then they were flipped for each other. But, both teams have benefited from those great players.
Yeah, even it sounds funny to sound right now. Wasn't Ben Simmons was considered a surefire number 1 pick at one
Pretty
point.
much, yeah, he was. He came out the same year that the Celtics took Jaylen Brown with the 3rd pick. It was Brandon Ingram was the 2nd pick. And I remember people saying they liked Brandon Ingram more than Simmons, because even then Simmons didn't fit into where the NBA was going because he couldn't shoot. I mean, we knew he had problems shooting at LSU, but again, there's just not a lot of guys walking the earth that are 6'11", 250 pounds with that athleticism and a pretty high IQ for the game. He can't shoot. That's a major issue. But yeah, he was pretty much considered a no-brainer, and at times he's looked that way with Philadelphia. But now here we are 5 years later, and we both think, and most people think, that he's going to be moved this year for probably 50 cents on the dollar. He's coming off a disastrous postseason.
Yeah, as we get closer to the draft and on draft night, we'll do a far more extensive sort of preview of the draft. But just for lottery purposes, yeah, Cunningham is sort of that what everybody's looking for right now. Yeah. That strong wing player who can shoot and score and play defense. He's been getting some Jason Tatum comparisons, a couple Luka Doncic comparisons, who it's kind of hard to compare anybody to Luka Doncic because he's got such a well-rounded game. But he's 6'8", 220. Was very, very good for Oklahoma State as just a freshman. So I think he fits the sort of prototype for what a lot of teams are looking for in a number one pick or a franchise player. Evan Mobley is the guy who most people seem to think is going to go to from USC. He's also that sort of prototype, but in a different way. He's a 7-footer who can shoot threes and block shots. Everybody's looking for, big guys with range. And then whether you ask, a bunch of different people, there's Jalen Suggs. There's a couple of guys who played in the G League who are looked at as top tier prospects. So I think for the most part, this is considered a deep draft, a good draft, probably like a B draft.
Yeah, not as top heavy, not a lot of like great prospects at the top, but maybe you can get some players in the mid-teens, which now the Celtics don't have that pick because they moved that to get rid of Kemba Walker's contract. And look, I've said this a million times, the 13th or 14th pick in the first round is not useless. There's a lot of top players in the NBA were drafted in that range. In fact, there's, a couple that are on the verge of maybe bringing their team to a championship. Someone like Devin Booker or the Greek Freak, they were mid-first round picks, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
At the tail end of the lottery or just outside the lottery. So you can find players there. Donovan Mitchell went 13th. Kawhi Leonard and Paul George were not top 10 picks. Klay Thompson was 11th the year he came out. Bless you. I'm doing the same thing today. We're both sneezing and coughing here with allergies.
The rain is kicking up all the pollen, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah,
but Seth, I think
another place.
We did this on a show earlier this year, too, where we talked about how I think this is going to be a frequent thing where there's going to be better players in the second round and undrafted free agents who are better. Sure. And you'll be able to find good players late in the first.
Yeah, wasn't Chris Middleton a second-round pick? And now he's the second best player. Well, Drew Holiday was a late first-round pick. I mean, maybe we'll do this exercise. The final four teams, how they were built. Draymond Green was a second-round pick, which shocked the hell out of me. He played all 4 years at Michigan State. I love Draymond Green at Michigan State because I was kind of root for Michigan State. I like Izzo, not as much now as I did then. There's been some issues at Michigan State. But I love Draymond Green. I was shocked that San Antonio didn't take Draymond Green at some point in that draft because he would have mentioned been a that before. I agree. Versatile guy that the first year in the league, I'm going, is Draymond Green with the Spurs? No, he's with the Warriors. And I thought he would have been perfect for them. Look, he's a perfect Warrior too. So you can find players, in the middle of the first round. I just don't buy into this thing. Well, after the third pick in the draft, it's useless. I mean, Charles Barkley was the fifth pick in his draft. How'd he turn out? Karl Malone and John Stockton were drafted in the teens. How'd they turn out? Dennis Rodman, I believe, was the second-round pick. I'm not saying you build your entire roster with second-round picks, but you can find players there that, can contribute.
Well, look, Zap, Terrence Mann just won the Clippers a massive game. He was a second-round pick. I'm not saying he's a star player, but he's a contributing player on a team that's in the freaking Western Conference Finals.
Wasn't Rondo drafted 21st or 22nd and traded to the Celtics? I mean,
he was. I think they just outright bought the pick.
Right. I mean, I get LeBron and Durant and Jordan was the third pick. And great. Obviously, if there's someone like Kareem coming out, obviously he's the number one guy, or Tim Duncan or whoever. But I get so turned off when people say, the 13th pick in the draft, who cares? It's like, no, there's all-star players have been drafted in that range. You got to just find the right ones, and then you got to develop it. I mean, like next year's draft probably will be more intriguing because you got the 7-3 guy, Holmgren, who's going to Gonzaga. He's supposed to Bates.
That's an A draft.
Those are supposed to be two great players.
Who have we forgot to mention, Sep, through all this? Who won MVP this year?
Yeah,
Jokic,
I mean,
second round
Jokic
pick, 41st pick of the draft.
Yeah, Steve Nash, mid-first round pick. Giannis, mid-first round pick. Dirk was what, 10th? Was Dirk 9th or 10th?
Paul Pierce was 10th, I said.
Yeah. There you go. Dirk 9th, Pierce 10th. 2 finals MVPs, 2 Hall of Famers. It doesn't happen every year, but you can find players there. It's so important to do that. That comes again down to your scouting. Look at the Spurs. I mean, Tony Parker was a late first-round pick. Manu Ginobili was a second-round pick. You build with those guys, but you got to have. First of all, you have to have proper coaching. What the Spurs have always done really well is develop players. I mean, even Kawhi, he was drafted by Indiana.
Bad picks. The Spurs don't miss.
They develop players. I mean, Kawhi, all of a sudden, when he came out of San Diego State, he couldn't shoot. Now he's maybe the best mid-range shooter in the sport, not named Kevin Durant, right? So, because he worked with Chip Engelland, the great shot doctor. That's what Ben Simmons has to do, is work with a shot doctor to make him better. I'm not saying turn him into Klay Thompson, but just get him better at the free throw line and get him willing to take shots 12, 15 feet out. That would open up things for whichever team he's on next year. And maybe it is Philadelphia, because they're like, we can't get enough back in return. This guy signed for 4 years. We have to live with him. But I don't know if it's going to work with Joel Embiid, because obviously those guys don't like each other. Neither one of them has been able to pull the team over the top on their own. So that's going to be an intriguing offseason in Philadelphia.
Sap, before we get out, I just want to read to you. These are the teams in the lottery, and I'm going to ask you just a simple question. Who needs the top pick the most of these teams, or who will it help? Would it help the most take to another level? This is in ascending order. So the worst record is the first team I'm going to read off. Right. The Rockets, the Pistons, the Magic, the Thunder, Cavs, Timberwolves, Raptors, Bulls, Kings, Pelicans, Hornets, Spurs, Pacers, Warriors. That's how it goes from worst to from the best odds to win the lottery, so the worst team, to the worst odds to win the lottery. Name maybe one or two teams, Sep, that you think that this could impact the most, winning the lottery or coming in, getting a top 3 pick.
Well, New Orleans, I mean, if they get lucky and get the 4th pick or whatever, or something along those lines, or the 3rd pick.
4.5% chance of winning the lottery.
Yeah, I mean, if that happens and they're able to get, I don't know, Jalen Suggs, or if could they get the 1st pick and end up with Cade Cunningham? I mean, that would put them
anybody
over the
could
top.
Get the 1st pick.
Anybody
get
the 1st pick. Yeah, I mean, obviously if Golden State gets the 1st pick, they may flip it. I mean, because they're ready to win now, and rookies don't generally contribute right away. Houston needs the 1st pick. If Cade Cunningham's supposed to be clearly the best player, they need someone, because they don't have anybody right now, and they lost James Harden and got really nothing in return. Remember when LeBron left Cleveland the first time and he went to Miami? What happened? Cleveland won the lottery. They were able to get Kyrie Irving. I mean, some people think it was fixed. I don't think it was fixed. But, when you lose a star of that caliber, LeBron in Cleveland, James Harden in Houston, it kind of feels a little better if that team gets the 1st pick in the draft and is able to get an impact player. So I'm actually kind of rooting for Houston to get that 1st pick, because, did Cade Cunningham goes to Houston, and maybe they got something to start with there, because they got screwed. They screwed themselves. They probably could have got Ben Simmons for James Harden, or got something more than what they got. And they're in a tailspin right now. I mean, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, they were right there with Golden State as the best team in the sport. And now they're the worst team in the sport, and you got James Harden to thank for that. So I'll probably root for Houston to win that thing. And if they get that 1st pick, maybe they could start rebuilding.
Sap, what about Minnesota or Toronto? What would that do to either of those teams if they had the top pick?
Minnesota is intriguing, right? Because we love Karl Anthony Towns, right? Although he's a guy who just puts up hollow stats, because
they've made the playoffs once, and it was with Jimmy Butler.
Yeah, Jimmy Butler, was the driving force. We love Anthony Edwards. I think he's going to be a star in this league. He becomes a more efficient scorer. I think he's got the potential to be a star, right? I mean, he's got a big game, big personality. So that's intriguing. If they're able to get Cade Cunningham there, now you've got a big and Karl Anthony Towns, who really plays on the outside more than the inside. And then you've got Anthony Edwards as your big, strong guard. And then you'd have Cade Cunningham, who's a guy who can do a lot of things. That could be an intriguing team. I also think, and Kendrick Perkins said this today on ESPN, that Minnesota could be an intriguing place for Ben Simmons. If they were able to add him to Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns, that would be intriguing, because Karl Anthony Towns would probably fit with Ben Simmons, because Karl Anthony Towns likes playing on the perimeter. Ben Simmons could be able to play down low more. And then you got Anthony Edwards as the slasher, perimeter player. That would be a pretty interesting play. So if Minnesota wins the draft lottery, now they've got draft capital to go get Ben Simmons. The only problem is, this better than I, you're going to have to match contracts, right, to get Ben Simmons?
Yeah, so, and Ben Simmons is a max contract. D'Angelo Russell could work, but him and Towns are very close. I don't know that they want to trade him. And also, I don't think, if Minnesota were to win the lottery and get the first pick or even the second pick, I think that's higher. That's higher value than what Ben Simmons is right now.
Yeah, probably it is. I mean, especially Cade Cunningham. You feel pretty good. Cade Cunningham's going to be a 18 to 20 point per game scorer, but also give you 6-7 rebounds, 7 assists. I mean, he's a well-rounded player.
Yeah, in his first year, I think he'll score around 18 a game.
Yeah, I mean, look at what LaMelo Ball did in his rookie year, and he was the third pick in the draft, and I don't think people expected that. LaMelo was 16, 7 and 7. That's damn good for a rookie, and became a better outside shooter. So yeah, I mean, if Cade Cunningham can be as good as LaMelo Ball, then that value is at least as high, if not higher, than what the value is of Ben Simmons. So yeah, it's a good point. If Minnesota gets that high pick, they may just keep it and take the best player available. And it just doesn't seem to fit Minnesota. Karl-Anthony Towns, I like a lot, but he doesn't seem to make others around him any better.
No, he hasn't at all. The other team, like I said, Sep, to you, that is interesting to me is Toronto. They have a 9% chance of winning it. They're 2 years away from winning the whole damn thing. They do have a star-ish player in Pascal Siakam, though I've heard his name a lot in trade rumors. Don't know what's going to happen to Kyle Lowry in the offseason. But they're a team that also develops players very well. They have Fred VanVleet. Just winning the lottery, could that put them back in, contention?
It could. I mean, again, Masai Ujiri, would he flip that? And again, I'm trying to connect Ben Simmons to multiple teams. Ben Simmons in Toronto feels right, doesn't it? An international city. He's from Australia. It's a great fan base, but it's not as overwhelming as the fan base in Philadelphia. Like Ben Simmons in Philadelphia just doesn't fit.
In my mock trade, Sep, I had Siakam for Simmons straight up. I think that would work for both teams.
That makes sense, right? Yeah, because now you get Siakam. That's a nice player to pair up with Tobias Harris and with Joel Embiid. I still think they need some help in the backcourt, but, maybe they make inroads to a free agent point guard, whether it's, I don't know, whoever, Dennis Schroeder or Ron, pick a guy. But that could be interesting. But Ben Simmons in Toronto makes sense for me. I don't know why. But yeah, that would be interesting. And look, Masai Ujiri, we both agree is the best executive in this sport. And in fact, he's the best executive in any sport. Any guy that wins a championship in Toronto in the NBA is pretty damn good. They'll be active. They won't just sit back and twiddle their thumbs and hope that everything works out. They'll be active there.
No, this was a weird year for them because, they were in Tampa Bay all year long. I mean, they didn't play any home games really. No. They're still trying to figure things out. I don't know what the future holds for Kyle Lowry, but he's a great executive. He'll figure it out. So I think it would be very intriguing if they were to win the whole thing. But we'll be back tomorrow talking about who wins the lottery and what the implications are. We'll also be talking more about the Bucks Hawks series as that's about to get underway tomorrow night. We'll recap the game tonight between the Suns and the Clippers. And at some point this week, we're going to address the story in The Athletic about the Celtics dysfunction. I know Sap really wants me to, again, have to rip on my Celtics, which is getting old. I would like some good news, but
I had to do it for the Lakers. So,
Yeah, it was like pulling teeth to get you to do it, Sap.
That was very difficult. Was true. That was. There was a lot of hurt there.
But we'll be back tomorrow for all that stuff. So make sure you check out when the podcast drops. Make sure you check on our Twitters for exactly the time that will happen at JohnSap25 or Jetstriar, JETSTRIAR. And you can find our podcast wherever podcasts are found. We are the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody.